Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think the volume is going. I think I can hear myself. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy here of Dr. Judy WTF. And tonight we're going to have a very interesting show, a continuation actually, on the topic of racism, collective racism, and the impact on all of us, and particularly the in this case the Ojibwa people. And we are continuing the case study with Violet, who will be calling in, and we will explore this really important topic of racism and narcissism and how they interconnect. And I will give you a little history of the mind map, because in this case it is extremely relevant to the show. The consciousness behind the mind map was originally to heal global disconnect. The mind map was called, at the time, Join the Human Race Healing Global Disconnect. And what I wanted to create was a sense of a united humanity, bringing people to the table of humanity, putting ourselves as human beings first before the color of our skin and our religion and our culture, and so on and so forth. And so I decided, no, I didn't decide. I did decide that I didn't have the budget to go macro, so I decided to go on a micro level and begin to heal human disconnect, hoping that if we heal on an individual basis, then eventually critical mass will tip the scale and create the healing on a global level. And I do think we have a call-in, but I will be short with call-ins because I do want Violet to call in so that we can get into the topic. And hi, you are on the couch with Dr. Judy. Who's this, please?
Hi, this is Violet calling.
Oh, perfect. Okay, hi. Welcome back on the show, and we're going to delve into this topic, and hang in there because I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. Announcement number one. Okay, thank you. Announcement number one. We are still continuing the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Group led by Yitz Epstein twice a month, and this is going on in webinar form, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and also live in Sherman Oaks, 7 to 8:30 p.m. every other week, and from 7 to 8:30 p.m. in Sherman Oaks. So if you would like to attend, please contact us, and you are more than welcome to get that type of support. So again, the mind map is a from, through, to model, from our wounds of childhood, through dismantling them, and then paradigm shifting out into healing. And in this case, we're going to be talking about the wounds of humanity, more of a global look at what's going on and why it's going on and how it's related to narcissism. And please, audience, know that the Mind Map video series is still at the discount price of $195, and you can avail yourself of that along with services from our beautiful team of Mind Map therapists. So with that said, I want to welcome you, Violet, back to the show. And could you please tell me how to pronounce this correctly, because I really want to get it right this time? You still there?
Yes, I'm still here. The word Ojibwa, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, say it again so I get it.
Ojibwa.
Ojibwa. Okay.
So, yes, and so it can also be pronounced Ojibwa.
Okay. Okay.
And it's and it also comes from the word, pardon me, comes from the word Chippewa also.
Chippewa. Okay.
Yes.
Now that,
I believe is a tribe coming, the tribes coming from the eastern United States.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, as an Ojibwa woman from Canada, and you're located where?
I live right now currently in Campbell River, British Columbia.
British Columbia. Okay, such a beautiful province. And for those of you who know that I'm was Canadian, I wish I maintain my Canadian citizenship. I did not. I used to live in Montreal, Canada, so Canada is near and dear to my heart. So can you please give listeners a quick recap of the history of Canada and the assimilation process that you and your ancestors experienced so directly?
Yes, I can. Since the 1830s, the Canadian government enacted policies which ultimately resulted in the 1876 Indian Act. These policies aimed to bring about the total cultural transformation of the Indian by assimilating the Indians into the white society. Government-sponsored religious schools known as residential schools became the cornerstone of the assimilation policy. My biological mother was placed into residential school by her parents, who were also culturally broken and struggling alcoholics. And when she was 19, my biological mother got pregnant and gave birth to me. By the time I was 2 years old, she did not believe she was capable of being a mother, and she gave me up for adoption. Because of the assimilation laws at that time, being adopted into another Ojibwa family was not possible. So I was placed into foster care until I was adopted into a Caucasian family. There was no contact allowed to be made between my biological and adopted families.
Wow. Okay. So speaking of narcissism, right, to actually narc out an entire a race of people, I can't think of a more profound example of narcissism, the intolerance, and also the betrayal of an entire government to enact this process. I'm referring particularly to the school systems that participated in this. Government-sponsored religious schools known as residential schools became the cornerstone of the assimilation policy. This is unbelievable, isn't it? It's almost like a dictatorship against the Ojibwa people. Doesn't it feel that way to you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it absolutely does.
And I think that's how you really destroy a cultural soul, is you cut them off at the root. So you don't allow them to express their beliefs, their language, their culture, their stories, their folklore, and anything like this is out the window in favor of assimilation, in favor of really watering down your people. And speaking of punching a hole in the soul, right? That's pretty deep. And so I'm not surprised that your people suffer from alcoholism. I'm not surprised that they need to fill that hole in the soul and mitigate the pain with some defense mechanisms that are not going to exactly serve your people and weaken them even further. So I want to hear a little bit about what your thoughts are on what I said, and how narcissism, in your way of seeing what's happened, relates to this entire betrayal process as I see it.
Absolutely. It's kind of like being, when you're disconnected, like when you're not allowed to see your true self, like your true form, your true authentic self.
Yes.
Not even really understanding even what that is as a child anyway, but just, as I said in our first interview, just feeling very wrong and not really understanding why. Like, a lot of the messages of racism that I experienced as a child, some of it was very direct. But a lot of the time, it was a kind of language that was unspoken. It was a feeling of being unwelcome, a feeling of being less than. So yeah, and it kind of, yeah, it just kind of becomes its own sort of unspoken language that you sort of, and messages, I think, like unspoken messages.
Yes, and
that
then,
are direct and spoken and unspoken. Pardon me?
so no, I was just looking at it from the point of view of, you know how I talk a great deal about seeing ourselves through the eyes of our parents and encoding messages from our parents, messages like I'm not good enough or I'm not this or that enough. Now we're broadening the lens to the cultural lens. So now the culture, the pervasive culture, the white culture, the Caucasian culture is now looking at you and projecting all over you and your people. And so there is no kindness, no empathy, no mirroring of who you are in their eyes. And I'm just wondering what kind of negative cultural core beliefs are being absorbed by your society.
Well, basically, I can only speak for myself. I grew up believing that I didn't have the right to exist. I didn't have the right to my feelings, and even though feeling my feelings were wrong anyway. So
Yes.
you know, like that's how it was kind of taken.
Yes.
So yeah, so it is. You know, I love to read sacred texts, and there's a portion in the Tibetan Book of the Dead that talks about the realm of hungry ghosts.
Yeah.
And it's when you're not present in yourself, you live among the tombs. And that was a part of the book that really kind of haunted me, because I thought, oh my gosh, you know, there's my childhood. Like there's that mental state of, I can't be myself and I can't really be here, you know, but yet you have to be here. You know, you still have to function and go to school, and you still answer your parents and try to respond to life as best you can.
So it's almost like you don't
like,
exist. You don't exist in the cultural norm, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. It's like having an invisibility cloak on.
Right. So continuing on from our first conversation, can you please share some more information about the Ojibwa people?
Yes, I can. From what I have learned from my biological family is that the Ojibwa people were commonly known as the quote-unquote backward people, because we approached life through the mystical blueprint of our intuition to better understand our physical reality. Furthermore, many of the Ojibwa nations that exist today are here primarily because of our ancestors' innate capacity to communicate and negotiate with Europeans during first contact versus warring with them. But most of all, it is our social ethics of non-interference that probably makes us the most misunderstood and enigmatic.
Well, I'm thinking,
sorry.
and I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to put this out. Misunderstood because they weren't interested in negotiating, right? They weren't interested in your language, your intuition. That was not really their way. So, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, they were interested as long as we agreed with them, kind of a
There
thing.
we go.
As long as you agree with us, then we're going to be friends,
Right.
kind of a thing.
Right.
So the following excerpt I'm about to read is taken from the book Dancing with a Ghost, Exploring Indian Reality, written by Rupert Ross, published in 1992. And I'm reading this from page 12.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The ethic of non-interference is one of the oldest and one of the most pervasive of all other ethics by which we Native people live by. It has been practiced for 25 or 30,000 years, but it is not very well articulated. The person who explained it best was a Caucasian woman, an anthropologist named Rosalie Wax, when she published a paper in 1952 called Indians and White People. The principle essentially means that a Native person will never interfere in any way with the rights, privileges, and activities of another person.
Boy, do we need that. Boy, do we need that as a human race. So I'm just going to kind of throw a couple comments in, if you don't mind, because I really want to highlight this, that what are we throwing away? You know, when I had the thought of join the human race, healing, global disconnect, I did not mean assimilation. I meant really bringing the gifts of our cultures to each other, to the light of the human race. Panel 7, if you don't mind putting that up. My vision was really to bring it and share it and honor it. And that's what you're talking about, is non-interference with another's way of life. So yeah, please continue.
Yes, absolutely. Just a minute here. I will have to expand on this by comparing this principle with Caucasian people and the way that they operate. The Caucasian person is torn between two ideals. On the one hand, he or she believes in freedom, in minding his or her own business, and in the right of people to make up their minds for themselves. On the other hand, the Caucasian person also believes he or she should be his or her sibling's keeper and not abstain from giving advice or even taking action when he or she perceives a sibling making an error. The Indian society does not allow this. Interference in any form is forbidden, regardless of the following irresponsibility or mistakes that our sibling is going to make. This principle of non-interference is all pervasive throughout our entire culture. We are very loath to confront people. We are very loath to give advice to anyone if the person is not specifically asking for advice. To interfere or even comment on their behavior is considered rude.
Interesting.
In other words, when I read these words, this helped me understand me when I was growing up, because I didn't have a reflection to help me understand myself in the midst of a Caucasian society. But the way I understand this is that a lot of Indigenous people, including the Ojibwa people, live primarily by an unspoken language of honor, freedom, and grace.
So gentle, so respectful. Now, I have a question for you, because I want to get your opinion, actually, on the concept of self-reflecting and self-correcting and teaching people that principle, which you know that I teach people, and giving people honest, rigorous feedback. Does that go against the principle, especially if people are coming to therapy? This is solicited because obviously they're coming to me to grow. So how does that how would that be perceived through the lens of your culture?
I can't speak for my culture, but I can only speak from my perspective. Mm-hmm. And I love the social ethics of my culture. And as powerful as that's been for thousands of years, we aren't alone anymore. Mm-hmm. And for me, personally, I've had to develop the language to articulate how to connect. So and I think, developing I guess I'll say the psychological language.
Yes.
In order to connect with a person if they ask.
Yes,
and that's the whole thing is we don't like to comment unless we've been invited.
Okay.
And
no unsolicited advice.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's, I'm sure, things, I can only speak from my perspective. Mm-hmm, and mm-hmm. Growing up in a Caucasian world, yes, absolutely. I had to become educated and learn to articulate how to connect with people, this took me years, decades of introspection and counseling, lots of therapy, and, education, getting my grade 12 as an adult and falling in love with English 12 and just, all kinds of different aspects in order to develop that language. But then there's the aspect of courage, and it's one thing to develop the language of my own experiences. It's finding those that can have done their own developing of language that can hear it, I think also too. And I think that, I think that it's amazing that we kind of communicate anything at all, actually, coming from our own experiences, because there's so many different layers of language, and it's not just spoken. It's, it's in tone, it's in all kinds of
the nuances, yes. And one of the thoughts that I have while you're talking about this is that there's 30,000 years of an intuitive, peaceful culture. And when people are aligned with their intuition, when they're aligned with their authenticity, their nature, then it doesn't really take a lot, I would imagine, to really self-correct. So it seems that there would be kind of like an internal compass of morality, of decency. And so it's only when we're out of line that we need to kind of whack it back in place and say, whoa, you're out of line, please. You're crossing my boundaries. And maybe the psychology of what I'm teaching people is because now that I think of it through your lens, is because we've become so misaligned and we become so far away from our truth and authenticity. And again, it brings me to a really sad place that we throw away this preciousness, this the light that your culture has brought to the human race, and now we substitute it for something else, something that is much more disconnected and narcissistic and cruel and unwelcoming, and it's just really sad to see this process really disintegrating.
I totally agree, and a lot of times I feel when I think about this, I hear your words actually repeating in my mind. That the ultimate end of the narcissist, or not the end, but the ultimate result or consequence of the narcissist is that they cut out their own heart.
They do. That's right. I just want to track it so that people can understand what the Freud I'm talking about here. So panel 1, this is the world vision I had. Once upon a time, we were one people, we were one soul. And then we fractured off and we individuated. And instead of becoming proud of our individuation and becoming participants in adding to the pot of humanity, we became selfish. And then as a result of the consciousness of selfishness and self-righteousness, you're better, you're better than I am, or I'm better than you are, whichever direction it goes in, it caused a lot of chaos. And in this chaos, we then formed further defense mechanisms and splintered even further into religions and races and cultures and political systems, and I call them isms. And these isms, instead of maturing and bringing their own light to a united humanity, these isms became narcissistic isms, so to speak, that then ended up clashing and destroying each other. Now I'm on panel 6. So this was, in my mind, the breakdown of the world. And having come from Holocaust survivor families, I always felt that from when I was a little girl, I felt that I had this big responsibility to save the human race, or else we were going to blow up, basically. And so my vision was always panel 7, which, if anyone has seen my my book is actually my logo, and panel 7 represents all of these isms, whether it be the Ojibwa ism or the Chinese ism or any ism coming together to bring more light to humanity, not to bash and clash against others. So that was the vision, and it's we're quite a ways away. So I just wanted to go on with some of the questions that I had for you. As you mentioned in our first interview, can you please share about your experiences grow up as an Ojibwa in a Caucasian family?
Yes, I can. However, I do not feel it is critical to go into details, but I will say that it was difficult. Mm-hmm. My adoptive family was not required to esteem me as an Ojibwe, as an indigenous Ojibwe, but to teach me to live up to the genetic characteristics of a non-indigenous reality. Mm-hmm. Extrinsically, the task of measuring up to a non-indigenous self-image required constant self-sabotage and consistent scorn of what was intrinsically me.
Wow.
And by the time I was a teenager, I wanted out. I wanted to die. And I began to build the courage to end my life. My adoptive mother did her best to help me. But as a single parent, after her divorce with my adoptive father, she was often emotionally and physically depleted. And not only that, but I believe my adoptive mother was emotionally divided by being forced to choose between empowering me as the Ojibwe that I am and her fear of what her own culture might do to her if she did not comply with the rules.
So she was in a hostage situation, right? If she did support you, then she was going against her people, and if she didn't support you, she was hurting her own child. What a horrible situation to be in. Checkmate.
When a mother is forced to choose between her child and the culture they live in, there is something abhorrently cruel and unconsidered about that culture.
Yes.
And while being forced to make such a choice is unthinkable, it is a psychic choice that mothers have been forced to make for eons. Nevertheless, my adoptive mother fought for my life, and she helped me help myself with counseling and education. So she kind of hijacked the whole political agenda, and just tried to do her best, with what she had at hand to
work with. Yes. And I believe that your desire to die was your desire to kill off the inauthenticity that you were forced to live. And, death is a radical thing that, in some ways, the death is the end. And in another way, I look at death of an old system gone wrong. That's what I'm referring to, the death of an old system gone wrong, which was the forced job on you to adapt and adopt this new culture, and it just didn't feel right. It was not authentic. You knew it, and you felt like you were, in a sense, participating in your own genocide by taking out on the Caucasian culture, and I just want to check with you. Did you feel that way?
Absolutely. Like it wasn't like all of this came to a head not 3 years ago. Like I have done a lot of my work and a lot of years of therapy, but all of this didn't come to a clear head until about 3 years ago, when it came through the class action lawsuits and through all of this, just the opening up of this chasm that I mentioned in our first interview. That my allegiance to my family was basically to annihilate myself.
Yeah.
And children will link into power. Because if they link into powerlessness, they'll die. A child will die.
That's
if they
right.
Link into, and so we link into the source of power, even if that power is dominating us and basically suffocating us, with domination. well, if you can't beat him, join him.
Well, that's the
You know, and
narcissistic system. Instead of the system supporting you and your essence and your culture and your authenticity, you were forced to hang on to this toxic bond, because not having the bond is death. Because we all know that if we're ejected from our community, we die a soul death. And that's why I'm thinking that you tapped into the body of knowledge of the ghosts and all of this information that you're now privy to. And so this choice is this narcissistic choice, which is, again, back to Alice Miller. So the child would rather be the bad child in a good world. So you would rather annihilate yourself and hang on to the toxic bond and somehow make your parents, quote, right, so that you can survive. And at the end of that game, you crash and clash anyway in panel 6, because nothing that's set up here is authentic. So inauthenticity breaks down totally.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we kind of go, well, into such a place of powerlessness. Like what I learned from the Dr. Joe Marshall was the term learned helplessness.
Yes. And Martin Seligman talks about that as well, learned helplessness.
Yeah, you get into a kind of emotional paralysis and physical, not physical paralysis, but emotional paralysis. And out of fear of betraying the delicate, house of cards, because in that kind of an environment, obedience isn't enough.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of your sort of almost like almost going into some sort of like spiritual bondage. And that's the only way I can really, and I have to tap into that aspect of it, because it's very, it's very real. Like that's what the source of addiction is the becoming so unconscious, not here, not present, and that's from not being able to fix the problem, to fix the pain.
So tell the audience a little bit more about what you mean by the spiritual part of the bondage. We know that there's this toxic bond that you have to adhere to because you need to tap into the protection and the love. And so you're making a very bad deal here against yourself in order to gain protection and acceptance and so on. So if you would elaborate just a little bit more on this spiritual bondage that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. One of the things that came through this for me was the value of the shadow. And what I mean by that is that, the prayer footprints, being carried through the desert. Yes, by the feet of God that carries us. Mm-hmm. Well, when we're not trusting in life, when we're not, because there's so much abuse and betrayal and abandonment and angst, that we sort of align with it in order to survive. You got to keep your eye on it all the time in order to brace yourself for when the next blow comes. You don't want to take your eye off it.
Right.
And in doing that, we're not really aware of what we're doing at that time. Is we're sort of drawing on darker energies in order to protect ourselves. What I mean by darker energies is the energy of denial, the energy of in my adolescence, I put on the mask of like a lot of anger and a lot of hardness, because it kept people it kept me alienated from the rest of the world. It kept myself protected. Shame, a lot of shame, victim consciousness, a lot of feeling sorry for myself.
Yes.
And so these are characters of a shadow, and it's not that they're, it's not that we're doing, evil in that moment. It's the fact that we're drawing on lower frequencies to protect us.
That's so well put. And as you're speaking, I'm quite an idealist in my way of thinking, and so I've always imagined culture sitting down at a united humanity table. And imagine this, you just put an idea in my mind. Imagine having a truth dialogue with the Caucasian culture. A truth dialogue with what was imposed on you and what that might sound like. I talk a lot about, because of you, mom and dad, to source the pain and to let out the psychological toxins. And for any of you who do not yet have my book, you can easily download it. Just request a copy, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And I do talk about United Humanity in panel 9, the end of the process. So imagine what a truth dialogue would sound like if there was metaphorically the representation of the white, the Caucasian race, and what that did to your people, and to come to a place somewhere in my idealistic head where each culture would really accept responsibility and own their own stuff. You know how I talk about own your own stuff, parents, own your own stuff. So imagine if, in terms of culturally, racially, everyone would just own their own stuff. What kind of release we would have, what kind of a mega release we'd have on a global basis. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and maybe even a couple of lines of what you'd say, just so that, you're tapping into your truth. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think that when we own our stuff, it is a very, obviously inescapably personal process that requires us to examine our relationship to power.
Yes.
Our relationship to our need to be right.
Yes.
And our relationship to our need to win. And in examining that, we can see the violence, the subtle violence that we inflict upon others. When I win, when I put myself in a position of superiority and I need to win, say, like over my daughter or over my husband.
Yes.
In immature, unevolved previous behaviors, when I did that, I wasn't aware that I was forcing them into the position of being wrong.
Yep.
And of losing.
And so against your cultural philosophy, right? So against your cultural philosophy, isn't it? So
yes, and it's a feeling of violence that makes you feel sick. It's just not, the true power. I mean, there's many different. When I say power, people, I know a lot of people get very uncomfortable. But what I mean by power, like the power of kindness,
yes,
the power, also on the opposite spectrum, the power of aggression. Go into the world of nature, the power of an earthquake and the power of a sunset. There's so many different dimensions of power, and it requires us to tap into what kind of power we're tapped into, what kind and why. And what's the payoff and kind of going into the crystal cave, kind of.
The crystal cave, I love it. And to me, it's always been consciousness as causal. So when we come from the consciousness of power, when we come from the consciousness of right and wrong, let's say, we will end up in panel 6. It'll create chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And in thinking about where this mind map consciousness even came from, it was definitely an evolution. I will refer back to a dream that I had when I was in my 30s, and I dreamt that I was on this rock in the ocean, and I was met by a dolphin. A dolphin, I don't know why, but dolphins really hum to me. They speak to me, and this time the dolphin spoke to me, and I knew that I only had one question to ask the dolphin, and it really was very scary and pressuring. And even in the dream, I felt like, oh my gosh, I better get the question right. I only have one. It's like asking God one question. So I say to the dolphin, who rules the ocean? And the dolphin says to me, but we don't think that way. Mm-hmm. And I know that had a profound paradigm, that my dream actually paradigm shifted me. And that dolphin dream, which I do talk about in the book, is my panel number 7 and then 8 and 9. And panel 9 has the 3 dolphins as the wisdom masters of the earth, because dolphins don't think that way. Dolphins think interconnection, the power of interconnection, which is a different kind of consciousness, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's when my auntie, my biological auntie, when she finishes a prayer, she doesn't say amen. She says, all my relations.
Oh, say that again. She says, my relations?
All my relations.
All my relations. Is that kind of what I'm referring to, like an interconnectivity?
Yes, that's,
wow.
Yes, absolutely. Rupert Ross, there's a video of him on YouTube where he describes I think it is an Ojibwa woman. She's an elder, and he asks her, he runs into her one day as they're passing by each other, and he says, how are the blueberries this time of year? Mm-hmm. And she looks at him, and after a couple of minutes, she answers him and says, there were lots of bears up at the dump.
At the dump?
And he's like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he thought, what? What is she talking about? What do you mean? And it took him a little while for him to understand that she's not coming from a perception of self-centeredness. She's coming from the perception, like that dolphin, of all my relations.
All my relations.
She's telling him how the berries are, that the berries are poor because there's so many bears up at the dump. Like the way they think is very differently, and the way we think is very differently. I always speak in terms of, because things are more than just what they appear. There's more going on than just what we see in front of us.
And I think we need a global resuscitation, and our hearts are dying, our souls are dying, and as a result our minds are dying, because when we're busy licking our emotional wounds, so cultural wounds and so on, it's really, really difficult to function, because we're not being in a supported amniotic fluid, a universal fluid, so to speak. And we need a definite resuscitation of our humanity. And I the closest that I could come to that is the drawing that I created, panel 7, where we're tapping in and going back to what you're talking about, and the consciousness of your people is one of peace and respect. And go on, because you described it better than what I'm saying. What was the consciousness of the Ojibwa people that we are basically trying to annihilate and throw away?
Of freedom, honor, and respect, and grace. Like grace, I never understood grace until I began to read some of the scriptures. Mm-hmm. And grace, I understand that now as, exactly like what the Ojibwa people, how they live. Like, they may be aware of a person's wrongdoing, but they're certainly not going to speak it all over the place and humiliate that person, by voicing their judgment about it and bringing that onto this plane.
I really like it. Yeah, I think me included, guilty of sometimes talking about other people, gossip, and just curbing that, because I think by by curbing it, we allow people to face their own and look at themselves, better likelihood of them looking at themselves in the mirror rather than being defended against the person criticizing them. We have a better opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I just want to ask a couple more questions here. Have you and your family had a chance to achieve healing and reconciliation?
I'm happy to say that I have achieved healing and reconciliation with my adoptive mother. However, reaching the same level of healing with my siblings is a vision which I have surrendered to the Creator. Okay. I have come to accept that my siblings cannot see me as I am because they were never required to. And I have to just say also that I didn't even see me as I was. It took me years to get over my shame of, it wasn't until I met my biological family that I would tell people that I was Greek because of the color. I have olive skin. I have darker toned skin.
Perfect defense mechanism, right? Because Greek isn't Indian, and so Greek is like, yeah, she's Greek. That's European. That's okay, right? Pretty clever, right? And I'm just wondering what it was like, what it's like for you now. Are you connected to your biological roots, biological family?
Yes, but I'm just going to touch really quick on my relationship with my siblings. Speaking from my own experience, healing and reconciliation has been, so far, a personal process that has required me to examine my relationship to my own sense of power, as I discussed earlier, or my sense of powerlessness. Mm-hmm. And, me not taking on my power gave me the permission to be a passive-aggressive bully.
Such a well-put comment, because it's away from the authenticity, and every time we go into our defense mechanisms, which obviously you were forced to because nobody supported your authenticity, but now you can see it. You can actually connect the dots back to why you had to play the game of life that way.
Yes. And but also, healing and reconciliation is also a collective process. And I believe that to answer my question, who am I, it is just as important to answer the question, who are we? And that is the second question is a question I cannot answer by myself. So it's kind of, that's where I'm in the place of surrender, because it's you can, we can do our own work, but then there's the collective measure also, where we all have to exactly as you're saying, the global reconnection of, like the movie Avatar. I don't know if anybody's seen
I have
the movie
seen
Avatar.
that, yes.
Yeah, when they say, the tribal people say, I see you. I see your differences. I see the different color of your skin. I see the different gender. I see whatever it is, and I see you.
And that's a connection. You see, that's a connection. I see you. I see your color of your skin. I see the differences. That's not a disconnect. That's a connect, unless you're coming from the consciousness, oh, I see you. I see the color of your skin. I see your differences as a criticism, as a way to gain superiority. When you're coming from that consciousness of, well, you're a lesser person because of. That's where the disconnect. Mm-hmm. The other one is such a connect.
Yes. And it's like what Jane Elliott taught me through her work, is that honoring each other's differences is what, is what oneness isn't sameness.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. That's why I have my panel 7 is the blue bubble and the yellow bubble and the red bubble, representing differences and the beauty. I mean, blue is beautiful, yellow is beautiful, red is beautiful, green is beautiful, orange is beautiful, pink is beautiful. And so by enriching the beauty of the differences, that's where I believe that's where our light is. And so I love your question, who are we? And we have to redefine who are we. And each one of us has to come to that table, so to speak, and clear our perceptual lens and understand that we've got to start paradigm shifting out of the chaos defenses and breakdowns now, and clear our perceptual lens so that we can see what you were talking about, see other people. I loved it the way you put it. Just you could see me. Who am I? See me.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
You know, I had an email right before I left to the show. I got an email, and thank you. I'll just say thank you, Jenna. You pointed out that things are not all that much better these days, and there's still a lot of racism within the Canadian government and culture. And you know, I want to read her article that she sent me. I didn't have a chance to read it, but that things are not all that much better. Is that so from your experience?
I think that, as I said earlier, you know, we do have a long way to go. Like in order to invite the part of ourselves that is less pleasant, we have to make a seat at the table for that part of ourselves, which means the part of ourselves that alienates others. You know, and the Canadian government has made a great step in this class action lawsuit and acknowledging, you know, these forms of assimilation. But on the ground level, I think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, not just politically, but personally. You know, we all have a responsibility in this, you know.
I really believe that until we shift consciousness and clear our perceptual lens, our lens that prohibits us from really seeing each other and seeing the gift that each one of us brings to the human race. Until we clear up that perception, there's just going to be a lot of political maneuvering and reshuffling, different textbooks to read, different versions of it, and it will be a lot of work. But you see, when we paradigm shift, I think the work lessens, because it truly is a shift, and everything just starts peeling away. All of the isms, the consciousness of critical ism starts melting away, and then there's not really work there, because we begin to see, and we begin to connect to our soul, and we begin to connect to our authenticity and recognize authenticity in other people, and love authenticity in ourselves and other people.
Yes, absolutely. I believe it was Marianne Williamson who said, when we honor our own light and shine that light, we give others the permission to do the same.
Exactly. Well, this is quite a topic, isn't it? And there's so much more to be said, and there are obviously other cultures and religions and so on. This applies to everyone, and whenever we limit our psychoperceptual human vision to looking at our world and other people only through our own lens, and forcing other people to conform to our own limited lens, then we're doomed. Yeah. So yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Could I just wanted to say one final thing, and kind of on a more positive note with my family and stuff. Just wanted to say, because of the transcending work of forgiveness as well as the internal work of developing the language to articulate the complexity of my life. I now rest in the understanding that I am part of a sacred and social contract that is far bigger than me. And just because I have begun to awaken in this contract does not mean that my siblings will. And there's a book that I read a few years ago called Elk Speaks. And he shares, it's published by John C. Neidhart. And this book was published in, I believe, 1881 to 1901 was one of the first publishings of it was made. But in his vision, he gives a very powerful. Black Elk was a holy man, a Lakota holy man, and John Neidhart was a Caucasian man that went to the Lakotas and spoke with him, and had a translator record their dialogue. And in the dialogue, Black Elk shares of this great vision he had when he was a child, when he died. He had a near-death experience and left his body. And his vision is parallel to the book of Revelation, which is what makes it so profound, that there is great, deep truth there that's not religion. It's not religious.
I call it universal truth, and if you will, that light in the center of the orbs that I use as a metaphor for the paradigm shift to a united humanity. In it is a big T, universal truth. So I want to elaborate. Maybe you'll come back again. I want to elaborate on what you just said, which is that you understand in your wisdom that your sisters are not in the same place that you are, and that true to your culture, true to your philosophy, that you're not going to stand in judgment of them just because they haven't arrived to the place that you're at. Am I reading you correctly?
Yes. That's exactly correct.
Okay.
You know, like it's understanding that everyone's at their own place of wanting to, like as we talked about earlier, wanting to see their own relationship to their sense of power.
Right, and we all ripen. We all ripen at different levels, at different speeds. I remember thinking about it as green bananas. Some of us are green bananas, and some of us are just ripen. And I know that we're almost out of time, and at some point I would love to have you back on the show. And I just want to say thank you so much. There are a lot of people who definitely can relate to this, and specifically, we've been talking about your people, the Ojibwa people. This applies to every people, every branch of the human race. So with that said, thank you so much. And I'm going to segue over to my Shrink That Tune. It's a little strange of a song, but somebody picked this for me, so I'm going to read it. And it's called Free Your Mind on Vogue Lyrics. I wear tight clothing and high-heel shoes. It doesn't mean that I'm a prostitute. I like rap music, wear hip-hop clothes. That doesn't mean that I'm selling dope. Oh, please forgive me for having straight hair. It doesn't mean there's another blood in my ears. I might date another race or color. Doesn't mean I don't like my strong black brothers. Why, oh why must it be this way? Before you can read me, you got to learn how to see me, which is what we've been talking about, I said. Free your mind and the rest will follow. Be colorblind and don't be so shallow. Free your mind and the rest will follow. Be colorblind. Don't be so shallow. So I'm a sister, buy things with cash. That doesn't really mean that all my credit's bad. Oh, so why dispute me and waste my time because you really think the price is high for me? I can't look without being watched. No, you rang my buy before I made up my mind. Ow, oh, now attitude, why even bother? I can't change your mind. You can't change my color. Why, oh, why must it be this way? Before you can read me, you got to learn how to see me. Free your mind and the rest will follow. Be colorblind. Don't be so shallow. So I think that really reflected a lot of our conversation. So Violet, thank you so much again, and let's talk some more. And I want to bring on the subject of healing global disconnect. It's always been the number one passion, and I realize that we must heal human disconnect before healing global disconnect. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for tuning in, and reach out to us at any time at the Psychological Healing Center, free consultations and anything you need to assist you in your pathway to healing. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. My honor. Thank you. Good night, everyone.